What I found is you can do far more damage. Like if you're trying to connect with dentists, is identify the top dental podcasts and give them a reason to create a valuable show together that they will then distribute to their audience. And so what's changed for me after all these years is I figured out is I pursue distribution like my life depends on. I want to know where the buying audiences go, and I want to stand my ass in front of the grocery store. I don't want to work for it, be like banging on doors, chasing on. And then the other side effect of doing that is, as you know, like you get to keep all your expertise.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of the $1 Million Agency Podcast. I am here with a friend, a special guest, somebody who has built 3 seven-figure agencies. So please, let's welcome Frankie Finn to the show. How are you doing, Frankie?
Patric, I'm stoked to be on here and doing this with you. I knew this was going to be a fun thing on the schedule, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, man. I'm thrilled to have you here, man. Every time I talk to you, every time we have a conversation, there's always like great back and forth and rapport. And I always learn something from, you've built your agencies differently than I built mine. And it's just, I love having people on here that I can learn from as well as teach our audience. So I think you're going to really hit the nail on the head with this podcast, man. So I'm really, really thrilled to have you here today.
Yeah. Excited to share with people. I mean, this is, it's funny because you and I obviously know this, but like, I've been doing this almost 20 years right now, and I never imagined, all the struggles I was going through. Like the first 2 years, I was sleeping on my girlfriend's couch, and I had the father-in-law tell me, go get a real job. And, the financial crisis was in full swing, so it wasn't even that easy to go get a job. And I never imagined that, like, we'd be paying this forward for other people trying to do this, 10, 20 years later. I just kind of was just trying to figure out my own shit,
I know it's too bad. The way I look back on it, when I was coming up and trying to figure things out, I didn't have me on my shoulder to try to help me out. And I was like seeking mentors and other coaches. And to be honest, I was misled many times. I spent a lot of money. Maybe I learned a hard lesson, and that was the learning that came from it. Not what I was trying to buy, but it's really cool. You and I are both helping other agency owners get to 7 figures and beyond. But like you said, it's 100%. It's awesome to pay it back. I said that when I was coming up. I said, look, if I ever get to the spot where I can return the knowledge so someone doesn't have to get punched in the mouth as many times as I did, I 100% want to do that.
Yeah. It's funny. I wrote an agency book, and when I was writing it, I knew like agency owners is a small niche compared to the grand scheme of people on earth. And I knew it would never be a best-selling book, right? Like it would never be like New York Times #1 because there's just like the audience size is not big enough. And it's funny because I have so many friends who've written books, and a lot of times it's really about ego. They're like, you watch, I'm going to become a best-selling author. I'm going to become famous. And I knew that would be like just not possible with this kind of book. And I remember thinking when I wrote it, that if it just helps one person, like that's worth it. Like if just one person buys this book and doesn't have to go through the things I went through, like you say, because I feel like for a lot of years, like I was just taking arrows to the chest and like, kind of paving my own roads. And there weren't really books. There weren't really courses. There weren't really mentors. A lot of that stuff I found 10 years into the journey, but I just like did a lot of dumb shit for a long time. But the flip side of that is when you figure out a lesson after like 7 years of making it, like you really, really get it, and you never, ever forget that. And it's very easy to teach it to someone else because, you have 2,000 days in a row of making that same mistake. And so like, when the light bulb comes on, it never goes off.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in those trenches, when we're kind of learning those things, it's crazy how maybe we're headed towards this direction with what we're trying to learn, but that information that we gain it becomes a foundation for so many other different parts of this journey, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. So for instance, like building LeadSnap, right? We're trying to solve Google My Business problems. And then that makes us better at Google My Business because we've had to go so deep on that topic, right? And it's not necessarily what I was intended when I started out, but it's like, you just become so knowledgeable in a comprehensive way when you spend that amount of time trying to fight your way through the high weeds, Yeah,
totally. And there's no shortage of those high weeds. Can I just say it's like, they're literally endless. One thing I used to kind of believe when I first got started in business, that you would reach a point where you're just magically happy and all your problems were solved and you just be, living on the beach all day long. And I have a very close version of that now, but there's still problems. There's still things to be sorted through. There's still, and the beautiful thing is when you understand that, I used to think like when I got started that like, I remember the first time I got hired to consult with $100 million a year law firm, and they were bringing me in as their marketing consultant. And I've never been close to 100 million at that. And so it's, I'm thinking like, what the hell am I going to tell you guys about marketing? And then you get inside and you realize it's the opposite. They got problems. Anybody who's ever worked for a big company, they got meetings and politics, and Patric only got promoted because he spends time with Susie on Friday nights and they're drinking buddies. And it's not because he's actually knows what he's doing. All those kind of things are going on. And I think the longer you do this, the more you actually appreciate the set of problems you have. That you're like, man, I'm much happier to have the problems I do today than sleeping on a couch and having a father-in-law tell me, get a job, loser.
Yeah. I mean, there is something to be said there. Like, you have control of your own destiny to a further degree when you own your own company, right?
Yeah.
Your ability to solve some of these problems is, to some extent, I think it's always possible, right? Like, I'm never going to be in that victim role, but when you own your own company, you get to decide which way the ship's going to go. And we can have immediate impact on things. Let's go back. So you talked about how, you're sleeping on your father-in-law's couch. How did you kind of start and get into the agency space? And you've hit around pieces of it, but I'd like to kind of get a better understanding of the journey that got you here.
Yeah, it's funny because I never woke up one day and said, I want to start a digital marketing agency. It's funny because it's become cool and trendy in like the last 5 years. And, you can work from anywhere and you can get to 10K scale. For whatever reason, everybody wants to get to 10K a month or 100K a month. Those nice round numbers. And I was still working on my plan B, trying to get hired in my hometown of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. It's basically like Detroit without the gunshots and the murders. But it's all like everybody works for Ford, General Motor, and Chryslers. And in 2007, the whole financial crisis of 2008, it began a year early where I lived. So I remember opening the newspaper and like General Motors lays off 10,000 people. And also it affects the suppliers of them and the restaurants that depend on them. So it was really like they just fired 30,000 people in a day. In a city of a 250,000, when like 10% of the workforce gets fired in a day, it's a big deal. And so I remember actually trying to go get a job, and I went there, and it was I went to a hiring fair, and there were 50 different companies there that were hiring, and every single one of them was a commission-only sales like company. Like, you could sell investments, you could sell insurance, you could sell mortgages, you could sell real estate, but you would have to hunt for your lunch. And so I came to the realization I would have to sell something, and I was like, well, if I'm going to sell something, I'm going to sell my own. Coincidentally, right at the time, I got a call from a friend of mine, and he's like, guess what, Frankie? I wrote a real estate course, and we're going to sell it on the internet. And I remember laughing, and I was like, no, you're going to sell your own real estate course on the internet. And it was a weird thing, but I hung up the phone, and he was kind of like, before we hung up, he was like, well, you're good with computers. You can figure this stuff out, and I can. I was like, I've never sold anything. I've never made a website. I don't know how to collect payments. He's like, yeah, but you can figure that out. I can't. And so he just hung up the phone, and I laughed. I was like, but after like 4 days, I was like, well, you can't really get a job. What else are you going to do? And so we went in.
It's like he decided for you. He's like,
yeah, exactly. So I didn't have anything better going on. So we went and did this real estate course, and I had this kind of like field of dreams idea that like, if you build it, they will come. So I just thought you like put up a website, you become an overnight internet millionaire. And it was like that simple. And we had, as many people find out when you build a website, I had exactly zero traffic. Maybe my mom and a bot from China were like my 2 visitors a month. And so in doing that, I was like, how do you actually get people to a website? And that led me down a rabbit hole of SEO. And so I started self-teaching myself SEO. And over the course of like 6 to 12 months, we actually ranked for really competitive, like real estate investing kind of keywords. Google sent me 100,000 free visitors a month. I didn't know anything about converting that traffic at that point. I just got a lot of people window shopping my stuff. But we sold a few courses here and there. And someone came along and said, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like something like $5,000 or $6,000 offered me for the website. And that was way more than I was making. I was making like between $300 and $600 a month or something like that.
What year was this?
2007.
2007. Okay.
Yeah. And so when they offered me to buy the website, I like, it was a no-brainer for me. It was like, that was more than I was making. Like, here, it's yours. And I had a little bit of time to do, like, all of a sudden when we sold the website, I was like, now what? And I had no idea what the answer to now what. And I was just on like some online discussion forums and was telling somebody else about the situation. Like we got this website, we got all these visitors, and somebody offered to pay me for SEO. They said, "Can you do that for us? Like, could you rank us in Google?" Or like, and it began like a thing where like people started paying me for Google, and it was ironic because actually in 2007, SEO was a thing that you didn't know very many people who did. It wasn't easy to find somebody. I think about how it is now, where they get pitched at 50 to 100 times a week at least in their inbox, and there's some like they're inundated with SEO pitches. But back then it was like, do you know anybody who knows how to rank websites? And so we became really, really in demand. And it like I started an agency before I even knew what an agency was, because it was just like, can we pay you to do SEO? Sure. Oh, I know somebody else. And then it just grew from that. I wasn't like very systematic about it or anything like that. It was just like all word of mouth driven. But that set me down, a whole rabbit hole of starting an agency. And really, I think in that first agency, I made literally every mistake you could make because I didn't know anything about hiring. I didn't know anything about teams. I didn't know about systems. I didn't know about setting expectations. I really didn't know anything other than to rank websites. Like if you hired me to get in front of Google, I was pretty good at that in detail, but everything else, the business around it, I was like pretty much like 2 out of 10 or worse at. And we managed to survive simply on the fact that like the deliverable itself was pretty good.
Without somebody teaching you, this is how it would be expected to start. And the good news is in 2007, the level of competition for this type of service was also probably serving up a 2 or 3 out of 10 on a lot of these different things, right? Yeah. At least you have the deliverable part, which, can be argued once a client is secured. That's the most important part, right? Is like you're keeping your word on what you said you would do.
Yeah, and it was a very ironic thing too, I want to add, because I know this is a struggle a lot of agency owners have. So I ended up shortly after as well, one of the guys who reached out to me, he was a guy who his wife was a plastic surgeon, and he sold plastic surgery websites. And when I say he sold plastic surgery websites, he sold like 1 or 2 a day, every day, all year round. He went to every conference, and like they sold a lot of websites. Like they made a lot of websites. And about 50% of the people would turn around and say, can you rank this website? And so he was looking for a white label partner. And so he reached out to me and said something along the lines of, can I give you one kind of test client? We'll see where it goes. And I didn't know that he had hundreds and hundreds of clients, but we did really, really well with that one test client. And actually, it's kind of a funny story because I wasn't even really sure what I wanted to do at that point. Like an agency was not in my mind at all. It wasn't like I was intentionally building an agency. And the way it used to work back in those days, there used to be a thing called a Google Dance, like where you built a bunch of links for a site and it would bounce around into search engines, usually lower. And then like 5 to 7 days later, it would bounce back up into its new spot. But for like 5 or 7 days, its rankings would oftentimes like go to 0. Sometimes it would even be bounced out. So he hired me, gave me 30 days for this one client. And I did nothing for the first 23 days. I'm not saying you guys should, but I'm just saying I did. And then on day 23, it's like, I better do something or I'm not going to be able to show him any ranking improvements. There won't be a month 2 to this. And so I did a bunch of work on it all on day 23, like a massive amount of work, spent the whole day working on it. And then it was in the Google Dance for like 7 days. And I remember the last day of the month, they were nowhere to be found. And I went to sleep going, well, I'm probably going to wake up and tell him I made his website worse. And it turned out he bounced. He was in like position 7 for his main keyword. They started at like page 20 and they were just blown away with that. They're like, you're telling me in 30 days, we're already like on the first page with, number 1 spot in the front. And then he started giving me more and more business and it turned into 3 to 5 clients a week. But what I say about that, what's really interesting to me is we were a white label agency before white label was a term. And I didn't know how to sell SEO on my own. Like I was dependent on other people to sell it. And so I know it's an ironic thing for a lot of people is like, I know how to help my clients sell stuff. I know how to help my clients get clients, but I don't know how to sell my own thing. And that was a real struggle for me for probably the first 7 or 10 years. Even though we had a lot of clients, it was also like, man, if like just 1 or 2 white label partners left, like we would go to 0, like real fast. So even though we did really, really well, I didn't feel very comfortable or stable or secure in that thing. The opposite, I was like, man, this can all go to shit at any given moment.
Yeah, it's a completely different skill set to be able to like do local SEO for your clients than it is to do marketing for your agency, right? Yeah. Like for you, I don't know about you, but I don't try to rank my agency for local SEO terms. I'm trying to for niche down. So I'm trying to rank it for niche related terms, right? So that I can bring in the type of client that we serve and not like a dog groomer and like all these, nothing against dog groomers. That's just not our box that we check, right? So it's a completely different skill set. This is like goes from local SEO to more of like pure marketing. Like, how do I get in front of the right people, and what's the messaging? What's the follow up? What's the sales process look like? So obviously that changed for you over time. This is how it started. And what were some of the breakthroughs that you had as you moved on and your agency leveled up so that you guys were able to secure clients that were not just white label ones?
Yeah, I think the biggest breakthrough I realized with that is everybody starts with, in my opinion, the wrong question. Like I get asked a lot, like, how do I sell my service? And I remember reading a book by this really well-known investor from the 1950s. And towards the end of his life, he wrote some books. And he said, everybody gets it backwards. They start with, how do I sell something? How do I make sales? And he asked the question, where are the buyers? And when I read that, a lot of things experientially for me clicked. And what happened was, like, I can think of 3 examples where the first is actually like my first ever job. I sold chocolate bars door to door for the blind. And I was like 13 years old, and like hot summer days, and you carry this big ass heavy cooler full of chocolates and you knock on doors. And just like anybody who ever does one-to-one outreach, you get a lot of like, getting ghosted. Nobody answers. Sometimes they're even home. You can see them home, but they still don't answer the door. A lot of times just nobody's home. Nobody's there, whatever. You get some no's range on the scale of polite to like, fuck off. You just woke the fucking baby, which I now understand as a parent. But you get doors slammed in your faces, and you sell chocolate bars. And almost always, like when agency owners come to me, like I would probably say 80% of the questions are about, how do I do one-to-one outreach? And I'm not saying it doesn't work. It does, but the flip side of that, it was always a grind. Like it was a major fucking grind for us to sell chocolate bars. For me, I made like 50 or $100. I could buy chocolate bars and go to Blockbuster Video and rent whatever games and movies I wanted. I was on top of the world at 13 years old. At that point, I thought I was a trillionaire. And but in reality, there was something we did once a month, and this is closer to the strategy that I believe that more people should be using. Is once a month, our manager, he would go to the local grocery store. It's called Zehrs in Canada, so like imagine like a Meijer or something like that. Or a Trader Joe's or whatever. So he would go to the grocery store and he would ask the manager, he would say, hey, we're selling chocolate bars for the blind. Is it okay if we stand outside? And so we'd put 2 kids at every major, like way in and way out, whether you want entrance, exit, whatever you want to call them. And every kid would be sold out of chocolate in 10 or 15 minutes, every single time. And I wish I could tell you it was because my pitch got better, but we started just to recognize buyers go somewhere to buy their stuff, in this case, the grocery store. And if we positioned ourselves as standing in front of the buyers, like literally a new buyer would walk by every 5 or 10 seconds. And there was very little rejection of it too. You just hold it up. If they didn't want it, they said, no, thanks. And a lot of times, like, they were hungry, they left with cash. And so there were 2 experiences that I can think of that really blew up my first 2 agencies, where I really recognized the power of this. And one, as I mentioned, the guy's name was Rick. And what I didn't know about Rick when I first met him is that he went to every plastic surgery conference you could go to. And he was a hustler, man. He just sold a lot of freaking websites. And he went to all the conferences and sold all the websites. And then in my second agency, I got connected with a guy who ran the industry association, and he had some struggles with different things they were trying to do internally. And I helped him with it. And then he eventually invited me to speak on his stage. And that led to all of a sudden, like, I would speak and speak and speak. And almost, I wouldn't say every weekend, but every like 2-3 weeks, I was speaking somewhere else. And what I found is when you go and speak on a stage in your industry, it's not uncommon you walk off and you sign 5, 10, 15 clients, either right then immediately, or like they'll show up in your calendar for like the week after, and they'll book. In fact, I can actually remember once a lady getting on a call with me. And she's like, we saw y'all speak at the National Trial Lawyers Association. To be honest with you, I don't even know what you sell, but I came here to buy it. So tell me how we work together, right? And it's created a belief in me that if you want to sell your stuff, I believe distribution is more valuable than money. It's like figuring out where people already buy stuff from and go to those places. And so I wrote about this in my second book, which actually just released today. But if you imagine two farmers, and let's call them A and B, or Andy and Bob, there's a farmer who focuses on selling his thing and he gets really good at it. So he stands by the side of the road and he says 2-for-1 eggs, high quality, premium, organic, whatever. He has a good sales pitch and he focuses every day on selling his eggs. And then beside him is a farmer named Bob, and Bob focuses on distribution. So what Bob does, he doesn't chase clients one-to-one. He focuses on going to stores that already sell stuff and says, we'd like to feature our eggs in there. And he makes an irresistible offer to stores. If you fast forward a year, Bob's going to have his stuff sold in 100 stores, and he's going to do multiples of sales, way more than Andy ever will. And I realized for me, like a lot of the struggle was as I focused on how do I sell my stuff one-to-one instead of asking myself, where's the grocery store? Where's the buying audience already? And what I noticed after years of doing the conferences, I noticed that in almost every like B2B industry, which the vast majority, whether you do e-commerce or you sell like online expertise, like coaches and consultants, or the vast majority of people I know in my world do like local brick and mortar, there tend to be 7 things that I've found that there are bought and sold in your space. And one of those is expertise. So like somebody in your space has a mastermind. Somebody is a top consultant. Somebody sells courses to those people. There is somebody who sells information. Like there's a best-selling author. There's somebody who's got a YouTube channel. There's somebody who's got a top podcast. There is also like self-organizing communities. There's somebody on LinkedIn who put it together. There is somebody on Facebook who's got a community. And like if you are working what I call like the redneck niches, they probably get together in real life too. Like real life face-to-face meetups. Imagine that. Especially if you guys work with brick and mortar, they have industry associations. There's the National Trial Lawyers in my case and the California Bar Association. They also like buy software and tools. And depending on your industry, tools may be like the Nailgun 9000, or in our case, it may be stuff like Go High Level, but they're also buying software and tools.
Or Lead Snap.
And then, and Lead Snap, of course. And then also they like live events, like somebody selling, somebody has a conference, somebody has a workshop, somebody has a meetup. And then, of course, like competing services so they buy pay-per-click from somebody else. And this was just a behavior I noticed by going to a lot of conferences is I would watch lawyers spend like, I don't know, a couple $1,000s to be there. And then they would drop a couple $100,000 on new services when I got there. And what surprised me is I would see the same lawyers and the same vendors week after week after week, and they would sell their stuff again and again and again. And what I realized through kind of this experience is that there's an 80-20 in every market where like, it doesn't matter whether you work with dentists or lawyers or e-commerce, like 20% of the people in your market spend 80% of the money. And if you identify where they buy it from, and then you go there, and interestingly enough, this is way easier than most people realize, because I got a chance to work with the industry association in the legal space, and behind the scenes, they struggled with the same thing over and over and over, which is one word. It's called content, because they put so much of it out there that like they'd have a podcast every week, and sometimes it'd be like, hey, we don't have a guest for next Thursday. What are we going to talk about? Or they put out a weekly webinar and it's like, oh, we don't have a webinar for next month. Like we need something to put in there. Or they put out content in the form of like their live event. And a lot of times people would say, the guest would say like, hey, I'm not going to go to the event this year. It's the same speakers as last year. It's the same shit. I'll go when it's new. And they would have to go, well, we need like 5-10 new speakers so that we can give them something new and give them a reason to come, other than just like we got the same people as last year. And so once you know that, it becomes very easy to like, when I'm breaking down a new industry, rather than trying to sell my stuff one-to-one, I simply find who are the people who sell those things to my audience. And there's usually like between 100 and 300 of them. Like it's a lot, but it's not that many. And you just simply like create valuable stuff for the audience. And the way I do this is really simple, is I give away ideas for free and charge for implementation. So that meant if I was like trying to do it in plumbers and I went to the industry association and I found out they do webinars, I would do a free webinar for their people and show them how to rank without me. And I know that 8 out of 10 plumbers who watch that will go, that's really cool, but can you just do that for me? Because I don't want to do any of that SEO stuff you do. I get what you're saying. I just don't want to do that. I don't have time for that, or I don't even want to do that. And so what I found is you can do far more damage. Like if you're trying to connect with dentists, is identify the top dental podcasts and give them a reason to create a valuable show together that they will then distribute to their audience. And so what's changed for me after all these years is I figured out is that I pursue distribution like my life depends on. I want to know where the buying audiences go, and I want to stand my ass in front of the grocery store. I don't want to work for it, be like banging on doors, chasing on. And then the other side effect of doing that is, as you know, like you get to keep all your expertise because like if I like the heart surgeon doesn't knock on your door. The minute the heart surgeon knocks on your door, his perceived status is lowered out of 10, at least like 5 notches. I'm not saying you can't make sales and you can't make clients, but it's really hard to like have them trust you as the expert when they show up and say, hey, like we saw you speak on stage or we heard you on this top podcast or we watched your free training at the industry association, they come to me. And interestingly enough, like one of the challenges I had is, and I'm sure you get this question too, probably about like 20-30% of the agency owners who follow me ask like literally the same question, which is if you're me and you're starting over, how would you get to 10K or some other, number, but like, what would you do starting over? And I got the question asked so many times. I thought at first I was like, maybe I'll create a course and explain it. And I was like, no, I'll just do it. I'll like start a brand new agency and I'll document it. And using the strategy I just described, all I did is I went to the industry associations, knew they were starved for content, gave valuable stuff to their audience. Eventually they published that stuff a week or 2 later, 3 weeks, whatever. Then those people come to me and say, can you help me with it? And we close a percentage of those people, a high percentage, I might add, because they came to us and took the first step. And I think in 26 days, we got to like, nothing crazy, but like 15 or 16,000 a month in recurring revenue. And it just goes to show you that like, it doesn't have to be as hard as people make it. And I really wish I knew that because I think I spent way too much time trying to manually one-to-one chase people and sell them. And now I'm like, let's just go to the grocery store and stand in front of where they're already buying it.
So you're kind of like identifying the stuff that they're already creating and then teaching them how to do it better.
It's more just like giving something valuable in the middle to their audience they haven't heard. So in my case, like I created that thing I called the 90-day challenge. It was just like, look over my shoulder as I build a white label agency up to 10K a month, because that was a number everybody kind of like shoots for. And it's funny enough, Patrick, I knew I could do it, but at the same time, I just have other stuff going on. Like I mentor people, I was writing a book, I got my kids, and we're doing like real estate acquisitions and stuff like that. So it was like 5th or 6th priority on my list. And I had maybe an hour to 2 hours a day to like realistically work on it. And I was like, I knew if I had more time and more focus, like I could pull it off. But I actually like regretted it after doing it because I'm like, here I am, the agency guy. I've started this challenge. Now I put my name on the line on this. I'm going to do it and I'm going to fail my own challenge because I'm not going to have the time and energy to pull it off. I'm just going to look like an idiot. I'm telling everybody to do this. So one of my first moves, and it turned out like, it was all good. It was totally fine. But one of my first moves is I identified the industry associations. It was like, actually first I picked a niche, and I picked a niche that I knew zero about. That was very important to me because like, if I go into like, say, personal injury attorneys or plastic surgery, I know who people are. And so I don't have to look it up. I don't have to Google it. I can, message somebody on my phone. I'm like, I want to go into an industry where I literally fucking know nobody. I don't know what they're even after. I don't know anything about them. But it just happened a couple of days before. Somebody told me they were in the water damage restoration space. And I never even really heard of it. But it's basically like, when your house floods, they're the kind of contractor who repairs and fixes it up kind of things. And so I went in there, and one of my first moves, I identified the industry associations and like the top magazines. There were like 5 or 6 of them. And I remember like just clicking on their website, and they had like expert interviews they were doing. So like they publish all these expert interviews. Now I know just from having done this behind the scenes, like it's a struggle to keep coming up with new stuff to say to people and find valuable stuff to continually put into those interviews. And I just scanned it for a second. I was like, and at the time, by the way, our service offering was SEO and pay-per-click. And as a big part of SEO, as you know, is content. And I was looking at it and I was like, they don't really have anybody talking about content. And they have no idea how much AI has changed the content game. Like this may be obvious to you and I in our world, but there wasn't one single article about AI or anything like that. So I was like, I'll just come in and I'll show them like all the cool things you can do with AI content as it relates specifically to restoration. So we just did like a bunch of little 5-minute interviews. But the flip side of that is they posted on their LinkedIn and shared on their social. They already had, in their case, something like 26,000 restoration contractors that follow them. So and they also have 10, 20 years of trust they've built in the marketplace. So like my perceived status, and I wasn't like trying to save the world. We ended up signing like, I don't know, 6 clients, right? Like when I say like we made 15, 16K, the beautiful thing about our model is like I had maybe 6 people in the whole damn machine. That's not bad for an hour a day, I think, and 30 days to work on it. But all we did is just give valuable stuff to their audience. Like I'm just showing them like how they can create this content on their own. I'm like, hey, I know you guys want to get these certain type of jobs. Well, did you know if you publish content about those kind of jobs, people are probably going to call you. Let me show you how to create content using AI. Here you go. And again, I'm giving the ideas for free, and a percentage of people watch that and go, I want to do that. Oh, that's cool, but can you guys create that kind of content for me? Sure. Let's talk about working together. And that's really it. And to me, but it starts with that idea of like, why did I go to the industry association? Because that's a big digital grocery store. Like they have 26,000 people, and most of those members are paid. Like it is not free. Like you have to pay to be a member, to pay to do updates. They have live events, they have speaking, they have training, they have webinars. So I'm like, I want to go stand in front of the grocery store. I don't want to be the guy knocking 1-to-1 and doing all of that. And then the other thing is too, is you end up with stuff that ends up as the best paid ads you've ever run in your life. Because like, if you try and like, for example, just give you guys an equivalent of like this. I have a friend, Justin Brook, who became really successful as a Facebook ad agency because his first move is he sent a box of brownies to Russell Brunson in the peak of ClickFunnels days and said, hey, retargeting is new. I want to retarget people and sell your mastermind. So he retargeted and they helped him sell a couple of masterminds. Well, he won 2 ways. The first way he won is that Russell Brunson then started recommending like people to him directly saying, hey, this guy did this free retargeting thing for me. It worked. But then the bigger thing is when he wants to run an ad, like, hey, I'm Justin, I'm awesome at Facebook ads, is never going to work as well as here's a case study of what I did for Russell Brunson. Like especially when he was at the peak of ClickFunnels and all that, like it'd be like, hey, look what I did for Alex Ramosi. You couldn't buy that today. And what most people don't realize, especially in like offline niches, it's like it's dog shit easy to go get that. So like I can go publish here, I'm an expert in the industry association, and then run that as a paid ad. And it works even better as a paid ad because they've spent 10, 20 years building trust and a relationship with that audience. And so I don't start at 0 in that paid ad in the same way that like, and Russell Brunson, by the way, in that example is a grocery store because he's a mastermind is an example of like one of the things they're buying in there. The expertise, I would call it. So that's how I think about it now is I'm like, to me, it's way more like digital networking with the top people and then just being valuable to their audience as best you can be.
I love the grocery store analogy. I think we can all kind of think about that in those terms. Frankie, have you been through the book 10X is easier than 2X?
No, but I've heard like so many reference from it. I feel like I've kind of read it.
That's what you're doing there. It's kind of like saying like, hey, if I wanted to get to $1,000 a month, maybe I could just like cold call everybody. But if I want to get to $10,000 a month, my strategies are going to be different. If I have to walk a mile, if I have to travel a mile, I could potentially walk. But if I'm going to go 10 miles, I'm probably not going to walk. That's a long way to walk. So your mindset changes based on like the goal. And this is what you're doing where it's like, hey, if I had to sell 1 candy bar, maybe it's easier just to go door to door. But if I want to sell all my candy bars every week, I've got to have a better strategy. And that's exactly what you're doing. I love this association stuff. We've had a lot of success in our agency in the past with that. And getting in front of a group of people and having the opportunity to speak, you're coming in with tons of street credibility. Like Justin with the Russell Brunson thing is like his position is so strong. This is one of the things that I think a lot of agency owners don't seem to understand is like, the types of clients that you land when you're doing this knock on the door versus the ones where somebody's coming to you, they're so much better. They're worth more money. They stay longer. They have bigger companies and they instantly trust you because it's like, if they're coming to you, some positioning has had to happen. If you're running like cold ads or something like that, that would be an exception. But if you're speaking at an association event and then they're coming to you, you put your contact information or whatever on the last slide, or you give them something that they can take action on, they're coming to you and they're already warm or hot. And a lot of times they're going to have better companies if they've elected to be in that space, if they've elected to be at one of these events.
Yeah. I have actually a name for those 3 tiers of it. And it took me a lot of years to understand this. So there is what I call like Jerry Generalist. And this is the person who will basically and I when I say this is the person, I've been that guy. So I ain't throwing stones at anyone. I just want to be very clear.
I've been that guy.
Yeah. Jerry Generalist is basically your client criteria is anyone with a credit card, and you'll do anything, whether if they ask for an email, video editing, funnel, website, pay-per-click, Facebook ads, whatever, you name it, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. And you don't realize this, but you're unknowingly working with the bottom 80% of the market, which is 80-20. Like you're working with the brokest segment of the market. So there's a tier past that I call Steven Specialist. And Steven Specialist is like, I just do this one thing. And immediately just by being a specialist, like I just do Facebook ads for attorneys or whatever that is for you, you usually on average make 4 to 5 times as much money for the same thing. So I used to see this like when I first started selling websites, it was like it was a chore as a generalist to get $500 to $1,000, and yet I knew people who would sell $5,000 to $10,000 websites and nobody batted an eye at it. And yet for me, I was always struggling, like $500, holy shit! Like they would act like they're giving you their firstborn child for that. And the real difference was the tier of client that was coming through. When you're a specialist, you tend to work with more of like the top 15 to 20%. Now there's one tier past that. And what you're describing, I call it Cedric Celebrity Authority. It's very similar to a specialist, but what's different is they have some sort of positioning where they have a media reputation in front of them. And so I think about that lady I mentioned earlier who said, we don't even know what y'all sell, but we just came here to buy it. The truth of it is that sale was made when she watched me speak on stage, not during a call. I could tell you it's because I'm so awesome at calls and I got my script and I got my offer and all that dialed in, but that sale was made before she showed up. And what happens is, when it really clicked for me is there was a little period where I got to work with some friends that were in TV. And I remember I was reading Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets, and I saw some actor was coming up on one of those late night shows. I think like David Letterman and Jay Leno, because I'm old. I have no idea who does it now. But I remember they said, coming up after the break, the star of the hit new movie, Patric Shannon, put in the crowd. Woo! And then right after the break, they do the same thing again. And the crowd goes crazy. And then they introduce Patric, the host builds him up. And I realized before Patric's opened his mouth, there's been 3 different points where between the audience going crazy and the host building him up, where they've built up his status, where he's like a high status person without it being said. And I realized like the digital equivalent of that, like us in our world, is media. It's speaking on stage, it's writing a book, it's being published in industry magazines, it's being on that training, it's being endorsed by somebody. Like if the industry association leader says you should use Patric for, running your GeoGrids or whatever, like it's going to sell just based on their recommendation. And there's 7 or 8 different things you can do, but ultimately all it is like putting a reputation that you intentionally engineered in front of your sales process. And what happens is when you do that, you end up attracting the top 1 to 5% of people in your marketplace. They tend to be way more serious. They tend to have way more money, and they tend to better be able to use your services, and ergo they make better clients. So I literally had 2 of these client calls back to back. I can remember back in the day when I was still figuring this stuff out, but I had an attorney, and he was a single solo attorney. He was in that sort of bottom 80% that I described, that I'd gotten through like kind of generalist strategies. And we had a call together, and this was basically the call. Fihn, all your leads are fucking shit. Like, oh my God, you spent all this money. What the fuck is wrong with all these people are shit? And then when I looked at it, as many of you guys can relate to, like he didn't call back people in a timely fashion, didn't know what to say. If he didn't reach them the first time, he immediately gave up. He often took because he was in court and stuff like that, took 6 hours to go back. He didn't ask for the close, et cetera. Like made every mistake in the book. But I had another call with another attorney, like literally a minute later. And because I just kind of got my hand slapped, I kind of thought I was going to get it again. So it's very nervous for that second call. And I was like, it was an attorney from Texas named Greg. And I said, Greg, how we doing? And I thought he was just going to give me the same speech. All your leads are shit. They're fucking terrible. Blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, great. I don't know if you guys know this, but we just ran our numbers. And you guys are our lowest cost per case that we've ever had. Like, we just signed 3 of them this week already. It's only Tuesday. I'm checking the stats right now, but we were just doing that. And basically, whatever you're doing is working. So you guys have a blank check. Just spend as much as you need to spend and go do what you need. And it really messed with my head. The whole day I was wondering, like, how could those calls be so opposite? The longer I thought about it was the tier of clients. So like almost always in every industry, the broke, struggling people are often like single solos. I'm not saying 100% of the time, but often they are. And so like, it was nothing against this attorney's name was Ron. It was nothing against Ron. He was actually a really nice guy, but because he was in court, you know, he didn't really have time to answer his phone. He had never really figured out a systematic way of closing leads and things like that. So he just didn't know what to do with the leads we were sent him. As where I looked at Greg had a team of like 8 people that were all just there to answer the phone. They'd all been trained on consultative selling. They had a script they followed. They entered everybody into a CRM. They had a rule. You have to call people back when they fill out an email form within 3 minutes. They reviewed calls every week. They followed up with people as much as 6 times, and they knew how to close and ask for, like, would you like to come in for a consultation in our case? So obviously, like, Greg knew more of what to do. And what happens is, you know, when you position for that top kind of 1 to 3% of the client, they're actually way easier to help. They're just way easier to help because they have more resources and pieces in place to work with. And ergo, they stay and they pay you longer and they're happier to pay you more, and it just works better. And often they're too busy to need like a million updates. Like, they have enough stuff going on. And so I wish I knew this now, like what I knew 20 years ago, but I think like 60% of success in an agency comes down to client selection. And if you end up like chasing the bottom 80%, you'll want their business growth more than they want it for themselves. And they'll fight you not on your competence and ability. Like I can think of an attorney where I remember he said to me, he was a single solo guy, and he said, you know, I've been getting by 25 years just on word of mouth and stuff, but I know it's time to advertise. I know it's time to go to the big time. And he said all the right words, but I remember we spent like, I don't know, $150, $200 on ads, and the account froze, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then eventually realized he had put a restriction on his side. We had to like Google it and check. And so I called him, was like, hey, like, it froze at $200. And he was basically like, the conversation was like, well, you spent $200 on ads. Why am I not a trillionaire by now? And had no real expectation of that. And, you know, Jeff Miller calls this $1 million dreams versus $1 million budgets. The more you work with people who have $1 million budgets instead of $1 million dreams, what you're going to find is like, they're just easier to help. And your whole agency, your retention will work better, your hiring will work better, your margins to pay people will work better. And it all starts with knowing how to get those top people. And the cool thing about those top people is they're not hiding. Like in the attorney case, like, they spend the most money on TV, the top attorneys. They buy all the top services. In the case of Greg, the reason he was so good at the phone, because he had hired the top phone company that trains your team on how to answer the phone. Like, that was not an accident. That they brought in the best to help them become the best at being on or the best at being, like, you know, knowing how to close calls on the phone. And so, like, you know, they trained their whole team. They had metrics, they had tracking, they had scripts, they reviewed calls, they made sure they were warm and friendly, and like, they just knew how to handle that whole thing. And I'm like, man, if you build your agency around just like 50 Gregs, your life will be easier than 10,000 Rons. Not that there's anything wrong with Ron. They just don't make for good partners. You know what I mean? Like, it's nothing against Ron personally. He just doesn't make a good agency partner.
For a lot of these businesses, their problem is not a lack of leads. Their problem is a lack of like business fundamentals and administration stuff set up. If they suddenly receive leads, it shows up as a symptom of like, these leads are bad quality, but it's like, you miss 7 out of 10 phone calls, and the 3 that you answer, you're not professional, and there's no follow-up to ask for the close. There's no, like, you sent the estimate and you don't check in, or you're not, like, for the 7 that you didn't talk to, maybe you call once, leave a voicemail. You know, we institute in our agency, we've got to call them back 8 times. Call them back 8 times, right? What's going to happen? Is the chances of you closing one of those, like, on those 8 times, is it going to be a 0% chance that you close someone? Because no. Okay, so that's going to be positive. That's like, it's a phone call. And if you've got somebody on your team to do that, this is compounding over time. You're constantly adding more revenue. How can you not have that in place? And it's hard. You see a lot of these people that were fantastic at their trade, and then they started a company in the trade. And well, the reality of it is, once you start that company, you're more than just that technician now. You're also like, You're the marketing department, you're the accountant, you're every part of this company until that gets filled. And a lot of the people that we've worked with or that we've seen, they don't know from the beginning that those positions need to be filled. Those hats remain on the shelf. And it's like, if they exist for a reason, if you don't have them, then there's going to be fundamental business problems. Somebody to answer the phone, right? Especially these guys that are operating heavy equipment. You know, one of our students, Spencer, was talking about how he does spray foam installation. And these guys are wearing these like hazmat suits. They're heavy. They can't answer their phone when they have that on. How is that going to work out when a lead comes in? If there's a competitor in town that's answering the call and you're not, they're going to win more of that business. And that's going to stack over time, right? That's going to lead to their ability to invest more in marketing and other opportunities to grow their business.
Totally. You know, like 2 examples of that, just what you described. In the beginning, I worked with a lot of the bottom attorneys in my second agency, and they would all say like, man, I'd love to do TV ads, like, and they would name the big guy in their city, but they're like, I just can't afford to spend like $300,000 a month like that guy does. Like, he just must have infinitely deep pockets. And so I actually like took that at face value and believed that to be true until I started consulting with the top guys, the big TV lawyers in the market. And they would say stuff like, well, it cost me $6,000 to bring a TV case in the door and I make $6,000. And I say, well, why would you do that? And they say, well, I have referral systems. So like after they become a client, like a year later, like a big percentage of those people will refer friends and family. So I don't make any money off them in the first year. But I know when they send me person 2 and 3 down the row, and I realized just by having that like fundamental business practice in place, they could spend more on ads because, you know, those people would multiply out the door. And so like, it wasn't that they had infinitely deep pockets, they had better systems in other places. And I think of another example. There was an attorney I had spoken to one time, so he knew me. He remembered me better than I remembered him. But a friend of mine was running his Google pay-per-click, and they were in this like conflict of all the leads are shit versus you suck at answering the phone. And so he asked, like, can you come in independently and tell us which one of us is right? And I remember I listened to like, I don't know, like 10, 15 calls. This guy was a bankruptcy attorney. I never really worked a ton with bankruptcy attorneys. But basically everybody who's like bankrupt has the first question, like exactly the same because they're stressed about money. So their first question is, how much is bankruptcy? And the person answering the phone like just sounded like disinterested and didn't know how to answer that question. So they go, well, you know, it depends what you got going on. And that's how she answered the phone. And so everybody would go, okay, well, I'll call you back. I got to talk to my brother, cousin, uncle, former roommate, whatever. And they would just like never be heard from again. And one of the things we fixed like right on the spot, was like, okay, you need to have a good answer to that question. Because like literally I listened to 10 calls in a row and every single person called, like that's the first thing out of their mouths. How much is it? So your answer needs to be, this is the script. Hey, that's a really valid question. Just, you know, the average bankruptcy is between $1,200 and $1,500. But what you may not realize is that we work with your creditors right now to lower your existing payments, and we take payment plans. So whatever you're paying right now, chances are we can probably lower your bills, not cost you anything. Would you like to schedule a free consultation? And that was like what we changed it to. And now all of a sudden, like this, you know, army of bad leads are suddenly not bad. But like you said, it like a lot of times you evolve over it. Like I never woke up one day and said, I'm a white label agency and I need to know how to sell SEO and create reports. I was just, you know, in the trenches doing it. And all of a sudden, like you said, all of a sudden now you got to be the marketer, you got to be the salesperson, you got to be accountant, and you literally know nothing about those roles, and you often don't know what you're doing wrong. But the flip side of that is, like, as I mentioned, when you work with the top 1% to 3% of people, they may have other problems, by the way. Like some of the top lawyers, for example, are some of the biggest degenerate gamblers I've ever seen in my life. Just go to Vegas with them and watch them like piss away 15 grand in 30 seconds. It'll make you cry. But at the same time, like they have their business systems in order.
Yeah. Did you know I played poker for a living for 10 years?
Really? Well, yeah. Okay. I'm not a pro, but I'm definitely well above the average amateur. So.
I barely even remember the rules now, so we can definitely play. But I would see these guys come out there all the time, these attorneys and stuff like this. And there are those professions that kind of lend themselves to gambling more. Like, you know, there would be a lot more attorneys there than accountants that were at the table, right?
Yeah.
For instance, like there's like some of these like high paying jobs that also have some like bravado with it, right? Where it's like those guys find their way into the poker tables a lot. And you're right. There are these tendencies and trends that will follow across these different business sectors.
Yeah, for sure.
This has been amazing. So like some of my takeaways so far and stuff that we've been doing is the positioning, right? Really being the grocery store, putting yourself where people are coming to you. It elevates your status. And what do you think about this kind of topic that we're on now, where in our agency, what we try to do is try to solve the next bleeding problem? Because we started out as, hey, we're like an SEO agency, and that means that we've got to be good at Google Business Profiles, right? But then most of the people that are coming to us aren't coming to us and be like, hey, I would really like to pay you for 3 to 6 months. And then it's okay if I don't get leads, but eventually I'll get leads and that's okay. And I'll just continue to pay you for that. But yeah, that's what they say. So then we're like, okay, we've got to have ways to get leads in right away. So we've got different paid media, direct mail, stuff like this. And then we notice the same thing where they're not answering their phone. So we offer like a phone answering and scheduling. And it's kind of, we separate ourselves from other agencies where we're trying to solve the problems that we see in their industry. And if you stay within a niche, like a lot of these solutions, you can solve them one time and then you can copy the solution for another niche, right? And it sounds like you were doing this with the attorneys, is like you're listening to the calls and then you're coming up with the script. You're like, hey, here's the script, here's the facts, here's the information. What do you think of this strategy to kind of like solve more than this normal like digital marketing SEO box?
Yeah. And, there's a reason why, by the way, I called my book Beyond the Agency Box, because I feel like too many people are in that box where they think I just generate leads. And I'm not saying there isn't a value in generating leads for people, but it's actually a very low paid skill because they don't really need leads. Like a lead is really an opportunity. And as many of you guys will discover that once you create an opportunity for them, they don't know what the fuck to do with it anyway. And so to me, like the more you can bridge the gap right to sales and cash collected, the more highly paid you're going to be. And one of the things that I kind of really learned from one of my mentors is he said that every high ticket sale is like a process. And he compared that process to like, let's go with the football field for this one. I haven't done the football field in a while. Well, if you think about a high ticket sale, when somebody doesn't know you like, and they know like literally nothing about you, they're standing on the 1 yard line, 99 yards away. And so I think of like SEO as like, this is my tool that I'm going to get strangers to come to you and run the ball 99 yards. What happens is, and I think you're doing something really brilliant here, because I believe more than anything else, we solve problems for people. And when you get into the trenches, you find out they got more problems than just people 99 yards away don't know about them. And they will tell you, and this is one of the things that you learn over time, is that they will tell you, we need more new people. And they believe that statement to be true. It's not like they're lying to you, but what they believe is that every ball on that football field along the way is perfectly 100% optimized, and pretty much is that never true. And so we've made a real living just helping clients do that process in reverse. So instead of looking at what's 99 yards away, I've done this with tons of agency owners too, and helped them reframe their service where what's 1 yard away? What's 3 to 5 yards? What's 10 yards away? What's in the red zone, 15, 20 yards away? And I'll give you an example of this in practice. So I had a guy named Mark. He came to me and he's selling HVAC Facebook ads. And he started it because they said, I need more new leads. And they all say that. And it's not really true, by the way. But they believe it to be true. And he was trying to sell Facebook ads. And he said, to be honest with you, it's a hard to sell offer. I'm struggling with it. And nobody really wants it. And I said, like, what did you do before this? And he goes, I actually worked in HVAC. I was like a salesperson. I was like, were you any good? And he was like, oh, yeah, I was the best selling person in my company. And I said, how did you do that? And, and almost what you described, he said, well, you basically give, like, as a salesperson, you give like 10 proposals a week and you sell 3 of them. And he's like, everybody sells about 3 of them. What I did that's different is I called the other 7 back a week later and just said, like, is there anything we could have done to win your business? Was it money? Was it price? Like, could we finance it? Is there anything we could do? And he said almost always like 1 or 2 out of 10 of them would come back. And so I look at that like, if you're running Facebook ads, you're trying to get strangers off the street who've never heard of you to do full HVAC installs. And I'm not saying that can't be done. But I look at Mark's case, he's got people in the system who they saw the ad, They clicked it, they read the website, they probably Googled them, looked at the testimonials, picked up the phone, called that person, waited for that person to drive out, met with them, talked about their system, looked for an hour, read a proposal, looked it over, thought it over, and didn't close. Like, if that ain't in the fucking red zone, I don't know what else is. And so I said to Mark, I was like, do you think, like, if you did this for other people, like, could you not just, like, say, like, I'll call back all your turndowns for you and see if I can find you a job or two that you lost? And he switched his whole business model for, I'm going to generate cold ads. And he just started going like, I just want to be your, what I would call the goal line running back. It's like, I'll just create sales for you based on the opportunities you guys have missed. And so he's just punching in like what I would call almost bots, people who almost bought it. Like for every 7 people who didn't buy it, like you call them, 1 or 2 more of them will come back out of the system. And they normally pay a salesperson in that industry like $1,000 or $2,000 for a full install sale anyway. So it's like, it's not even like unusual. Like, sure, I'll pay you $2,000 for you bring me somebody, I'll give you $2,000. Like they don't bat an eye at that because that's what they're used to paying anyway. And so we simplified his whole agency by doing that. I believe either doing that directly or having some element of that in the beginning of your service where you create a quick win for them is kind of crucial to that. Like, I'm not saying you guys can't build long-term solutions where you build a conveyor belt and bring people 99 yards at the field. But I guarantee you there are opportunities that are 5 yards away or less that if you just tap into those would work. Like, you know, like I think about attorneys, like most attorneys call somebody once and then they never hear from me again. Like you sent some emails, said, hey, here's some testimonials. We still want you. Come back. Can we get you in for a consultation? Like, I don't know what percentage that would be, but I guarantee you like somebody would come in. And then even easier, that is often, depending on the industry, a lot of times you can just sell more to the people who are buying it right then and there, right? Like the McDonald's, would you like to supersize that? So I think that's the real problem, that the more you address their real problem, I'm not saying leads aren't valuable, but the more you're actually like, no, I'm a source of cash for you collected in the bank, and I will help you with your cash flow, and whatever you pay me will be less than whatever, you know, I'm generating for you. And the way to do that to me is not by being the master at run a play and get you 99 yards. It's just like, hey, did you know you got stuff over here that's 5 yards away? Like I wrote about it in my book, but I had an attorney, we sent a little campaign for him. It was 4 emails. It's Frank Kern's 4-day cash machine, just like modified for attorneys. And it just said, hey, we appreciate you so much. I know I haven't talked to you guys in forever, but we just want to let you know, if you have any legal questions, we're here for you. We got you. I'm your trusted advisor for life. You got friends and family, call this number. This is our VIP number. It will give you guys like free access to any attorney questions you want to ask. And I remember I bumped into the attorney that I first ran that for like a few months later at an event. He said, you know, you made us $100,000 with those 4 emails. I was like, what? Right. And I wish I could tell you it was because the copy was so brilliant and my messaging was so on point. But the reality was he had a list of like 10,000 people who had worked with his law firm over like 20 years and never really thought to email him anything. I sent an email and sure enough, 3 or 4 of them came out of the woodwork and came to work with him and, you know, made a bunch of money doing that. So I think there's opportunities like this hidden, but you have to learn to ignore them when they say, what I need is for you to get me new people and bring them 99 yards. And you have to go, okay, I know you believe that to be true, but I bet you we got something here that's 5 yards away that we could just punch in right now.
Yeah, it's quick results and it's low hanging fruit, right? Yeah. It's like SEO can take a long time and it's like a battlefield, right? Yeah. That all these hoops you got to jump through. This is massive obstacle course that you have to go and it takes tons of time. And there's stuff that's like waiting. It's just waiting to be pulled off the tree that's right here, right? Yeah, it's really smart. Frankie, dude, this was fantastic, man. So many like pieces of wisdom and value. Some of the stuff in here, I'm going to have my team and my agency go through because I think there's better ways for us to capitalize on it. I love this final segment here around the low-hanging fruit is absolutely fantastic. I'm definitely going to check out your book, man. If you're so inclined to send Patric a signed copy, I would love that. Otherwise, I'm going on to Amazon and I'm going to get myself that because
I'll do it, my man. Although it's a little tricky to just, you know, when I send it to Mexico where I live, the postal service here is garbage, so it may not arrive to you.
So you've got to get it like from Amazon and then sign it and send it. Okay. Yeah. I'll just get it. And when I have you at our event, hopefully in February, I'm going to have you sign it for me. Frankie, how can people contact you or reach you if they're interested in connecting with you more?
Well, I got a book, as mentioned. You guys can check it out at Beyond the Agency Box. It is on Amazon, but if you guys want to get like a digital copy for a whole bunch cheaper than what it sells for on Amazon, you can go to beyondtheagencybox.com. And I got a Facebook group too, which you are in. And we share a lot of the stuff that's working, especially on the marketing side. You know, I've been working to add more operations kind of stuff too, so you guys can build and scale your teams. But we got some pretty creative strategies. People know us most as the guy who sells stuff without phone calls. So that's usually pretty exciting to people, as he close clients over 5-minute videos. And if you guys are interested in that, it's called Beyond Agency Profits. You can find it on the old Facebook. It's free. So check that out.
Awesome. I love it. Any final words before we jump off here?
Just that this was a lot of fun, my man. I'm really honored and appreciative that Mr. Lead Snap himself would have me on.
Yeah, man, this was fantastic. I just love having guests like you that have been in the trenches for a long time and have such perspective after seeing things from a bunch of different angles and trying and failing, and then coming back and being like, hey, here's the way that you can fast forward things. Because I've heard the same question, just like you, 100 times. I'm like, you had to start over again. How do you go to 10K? Well, it starts with positioning. Position yourself really, really well. And like everything else falls into place, better clients, the people you want to work with, people that are spending more money, people that have a system in place. So this was an amazing episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Frankie.
Yeah, same. Appreciate you.